Record so I don't forget. So hello and welcome everyone. My name is Brianna Jones. I am the Assistant Director here at the Leadership Institute. Thank you for spending the last hour of your morning with us. Welcome back to those who have attended the series this year, and hello to all of our new viewers and newcomers that are joining us for this series. During our time together, we really want to make this as interactive as possible. So while you are muted, please use the chat feature to respond to anything that the speaker is saying. And I will make sure that I pause Shayna throughout our time together so that she can address those comments and questions as they come in. If you want to submit your questions to me directly instead of putting it in the general chat, feel free to do so. And I will introduce today's speaker, who is Shayna Young. She is the AVP of Leadership Development here at Columbus State University, as well as the Executive Director of the Leadership Institute. Shayna is certified in a wide variety of assessment tools, RightPath 360, Hogan, DISC. Shayna leads the strategic planning research for our clients here at the Leadership Institute, as well across CSU's campus. She is a member of Leadership Georgia. She was named Georgia Trends 40 Under 40. She is a graduate of the Columbus Chamber of Commerce Leadership Columbus class, as well as was named as Columbus and the Valley magazine's 5 Under 40. So with those introductions, I will let Shayna have the floor. I will be on again to moderate throughout. So thank you for joining.
Thank you, Brianna, and welcome everybody. Thanks for being here this afternoon, or excuse me, this morning, as we get ready to roll into our lunch hour. If you have your lunch and you're eating at your desk, like many of us often do, please feel free to do that. And we will be using the chat feature throughout. I may ask you to contribute, give us some info, respond to a question or two through the chat so we can kind of see what others are thinking. So thank you for that introduction, Bree. Just so everyone knows, I am no longer under 40, as all of the accolades I received were several years ago now. And I'm officially in the over 40 group. But I think this topic today of doing less is something, I don't care what age group you're in, and especially in this time and place in which we are all working and living, is something we need to be thinking about, something we need to be considering, and something we need to be figuring out how to do. Doing less is not about quitting. Doing less is not about not doing a good job. Doing less is about making decisions about what you will and won't be spending your time on. Doing less is about doing more for yourself, for your family, for those that you love and care about, and doing more for your job in a way that is meaningful, in a way that has impact, in a way that makes you feel connected to the work that you do and why you chose to do it in the first place. So let's watch a quick video about doing less and what that actually means.
How would you go about fixing this wobbly bridge? How about changing this grid pattern to make it symmetrical?
When people solve problems, typically they think, well, what can I add that will make it better?
Wait, also left to right. I see there's a couple of green boxes I need to change.
No, I could have got, I should have taken. We tend not to ask ourselves, what can we take away from it? What can we subtract? What can we remove? That might still make something better. Yeah.
Lydie Klotz is an engineer who's fascinated by the psychology of design. He started to notice that people's first instinct is often to add.
One real epiphany was playing Legos actually with my son Ezra, who's about 2.5 at the time.
Oops.
And we were building a Lego bridge basically. And so the two columns on the bridge, one was longer than the other one. And so to make the bridge level, I turned around to grab a block to add to the shorter column. And by the time I had turned around, Ezra had just removed a block from the longer column.
Lydie realised that in many cases, removing an element actually leads to better design.
One example that we love is the balance bikes, the pedalless miniature bikes that allow 2-year-olds to ride. And if you've seen a little 2-year-old going on these things, I mean, it just makes you disappointed that you didn't have it when you were a kid. But the breakthrough was just taking away the pedals.
It took decades for someone to think of removing the pedals rather than adding stabilisers. And yet, through history, people have championed different kinds of minimalism.
People are familiar with Marie Kondo, right? Tidying your home. But, going back, you think Leonardo da Vinci, his famous definition of perfection is when there's nothing left to take away. And my personal favorite is Lao Tzu, which is, I'm paraphrasing here, but to gain knowledge, add things every day. To gain wisdom, subtract things every day. And what's interesting about this is all throughout history, there have been these reminders, but the fact that we need a reminder is some of the best evidence that our brains don't think of it on their own.
Lydie's been working with a team of behavioural scientists to try and figure out why our brains default to adding and what, if anything, can be done to change this.
So in our first study, we showed people a Lego structure that looked like this. And the instructions were to improve this structure so that it could hold a brick above a small figurine.
Most of the participants added bricks for support. That is, unless the experimenters reminded people that they could add or remove bricks.
Half of participants were told that each piece that you add costs 10 cents. And the other half of participants were told that each piece that you add costs 10 cents, but removing pieces is free. So when we reminded participants that removing pieces is free, participants were much more likely to remove pieces from the structure than when we didn't remind them.
Without reminders, only 41% of people took away the extra brick. But when cued, 61% went with the cheaper solution. Could it be that taking things away just doesn't occur to people? Gabrielle wanted to know what other factors affect this behaviour. For example, what if people tried the task while distracted by something else?
We gave them a 10 by 10 grid.
During the task, you'll be given a set of patterns. Change each pattern so it's perfectly symmetrical from left to right and from top to bottom.
Subtracting would require fewer clicks than adding, and the instructions were to use as few clicks as possible.
But there was another task that participants were asked to do at the same time.
Right, press F every time you see a 5.
Okay.
So many 5s.
There's another 5. Okay, if there's another 5. I've not even got a time to start the task. 2 5s. Oh, lots of 5s. Finally, I think I've got it. Okay, done.
What we find is that when they are under what we call cognitive load, so when they are distracted, when their attention is taken up by another task, that's when it tends not to occur to people that they could solve the task by removing those extra squares.
Oh, I could have got, this is not, I should have taken, oh dear. Let me retreat.
When people have more time or attention or cognitive resources, they're more likely to find the more efficient solution. But adding things was still the default response across a range of examples and conditions studied.
So this is a novel heuristic. Heuristics are basically mental shortcuts that people take when they process any kind of information. And so by identifying one way in which that information processing is biased, that it's biased toward additive solutions and not thinking of subtractive ones, I really think that we're onto something kind of new here.
Gabrielle and the team think that this previously unrecognised bias in thinking could have big implications.
When we overlook subtraction, that's when we get things like overburdened schedules, busy people, increasing red tape in institutions, and we're missing out on opportunities, right? Opportunities to make our lives more fulfilling, institutions more effective, institutions more efficient, and even to make the planet better, more livable, more green, more sustainable.
All right, so I always enjoy starting out with that video because I think we don't, as a people, consider the fact that we don't consider subtraction. When we are looking to improve ourselves, improve our lives, improve our jobs, efficiency and effectiveness, our brains are biased towards trying to add and do more and add and put more and more things on. When in reality, we should really probably start thinking our first thought processes, our first thoughts should be about what can we remove? Even when we do strategic planning now, working with organizations and businesses, one of the overarching questions that we begin with is for every strategy you have, anything new that you're looking to start, what are you going to stop doing? There's got to be something that you're going to stop. There's got to be something that you're going to let go of, do less of, in order to add something to. I remember seeing during the pandemic, lots of people posting about when we were all at home about how, you know, what are you going to do with this time? How are you going to do more? How are you going to use this to add, you know, this time that you're at home to add to all the things that you're doing? And I remember seeing people online, virtually through social media being like, are you kidding me? Add? You want me to try to do more with myself when I've got 3 kids in the next room trying to go to school? I'm trying to work from my couch while we're all listening with our earbuds in or talking over each other. I can't keep a house clean. I can't keep the yard cut. I now got a pet because everybody got pets during the pandemic. I mean, we're always pushing people, it seems, to do more, when the first question we should ask is, what are we going to let go of first for anything new that we are going to start? So some famous examples of less that I really love, and I want to hear some from you as well. But subtraction does equal improvement. It doesn't equal loss. Subtraction can make things better. Not necessarily just adding to all of the time. Now in the video, we saw the mention of Maria Kondo, where hold it in your hands, and if you don't love it, throw it out. And I'm sure that you have seen, if it doesn't spark joy, you let go of it. And I'm sure you've seen all the fun memes out there with people holding their significant other saying it doesn't spark joy and trying to throw that person out the door as a part of the Maria Kondo. But it's such a great point there. The simplification of your home also allows for your mind to be clearer. The simplification, the decluttering of your desk or the space in which you assume when you are working allows for a clearer mind and clearer thought process. So the idea of touching the things in your home that don't bring you joy and letting go of them and creating less in your life is good. I think MTV's Unplugged, for those of us who remember MTV Unplugged, is one of the greatest examples of less. Watching artists perform their albums acoustic on that set and hearing them for the first time has produced some great music for us that we would have never gotten to hear in that particular way. Unplugged, they stripped everything away. They brought it down to just the musicians, their instruments, and everything else was taken away and produced something really beautiful for us. I think most of us are familiar with editing. When you write, you put it all in, and then before you get to that final product, you start taking things out. And we need to apply that same aspect to our lives. How can I edit all of the things that I am doing so that I am feeling fulfilled and so that I am creating my maximum potential in the things that I am choosing to do. Even now with texting and all the emojis and things like that, that's an abbreviated, stripped down version of communication that, you know, most of our children use when they're talking to us. It is less, but still saying the same thing in a lot of ways. So does anybody have any examples of things where people have done less, or either, you know, like I know some of these are a little more famous examples like MTV Unplugged, but things where you've done less or you've seen less and it's made something better or more effective or more efficient? If you have some examples, type those in the chat for us to see if something has popped in your head where less has actually made it better.
Oh, we have some good responses. Take a wall out to an open room.
Yes.
Move to new residents.
Moving can always help you embrace less. I've never thrown stuff out so fast in my life. And when we move offices or move homes, you're like, yeah, I don't know why I kept that. I don't need it.
Yeah. Same here. I can't wait we're going to be transitioning into new office spaces, and I am excited to declutter for sure. Remove salt, taste the actual food. That's a good one, Rachel. For strength building, less reps with higher weights work better than
good
more
to know,
reps.
Doris. Thank you.
I've enjoyed cookbooks that focus on only 5 ingredients. Amen, Catherine.
Yes. Yeah, still good. Easier, faster, and more effective, more efficient, gets you to good food. You don't have to keep adding and adding and adding and adding. Set your limits on your work hours. Absolutely. You are allowed to do that. You do not have to be available 24/7. And I know a lot of us feel like, oh, easier said than done. And you feel like you have to be available, but no, you really don't. And you can have more effective and efficient and fulfilling work if you actually commit to your work hours, instead of saying, well, I'm not going to do that right now. I'll look at that tonight after the kids go to bed, or I'll look at that tonight, you know, before I go to bed. If you will stop saying that to yourself and just say, no, I'm committing to myself right now that I'm going to do this before I leave work, so that when I leave work, I can be not just physically present, but mentally present and emotionally present to wherever I'm about to go next. Yes, make it beautiful and minimal. Ooh, Luana, capsule wardrobes. I love that. I've seen that where they're like, buy the black outfit and then you only need X number of pieces. And as long as you have like tan, black, and white in there and maybe some navy, you're like good to go, and you can mix and match everything. I love it. Listen more and say less. Yes, Ernie, I'm actually going to develop this whole session into something called Say Less for a group that we're doing that are of marketing and communication professionals. So taking that same mindset and applying it everywhere. These are great. Thanks, guys. And if anything else occurs to you as we're going through this, that is a great example of less, keep adding in. I love seeing these. So why do we lean towards complexities? Why do we feel like or automatically assume in our brains that complexity is better? The more complex something is, the harder it is, it must be better. That's just simply not true. You know, our failure to subtract is just the root cause of our cluttered calendars, closets, and inboxes. So, and like Christine said, narrowing down your children's extracurricular activities. You know, you don't have to say yes to every single thing. You can say yes to a couple of things. You don't have to, and remember, every time you say yes to something, whether this is at work, at home, and extracurricular community activities, you're saying no to something you're already committed to. Because that means there's going to be less of you, less of your availability, less brain space, less whatever, every time you commit to one more thing. And when left to our own devices, we just tend to overlook subtraction as a way to solve problems. And it really should be our first thought in solving a problem instead of our last thought of, yes, this is a good idea. How can we follow the advice of it's perfect when there's nothing left to take away. That's what we should really be building on. So, complexity is really self-imposed, and complexity and adding more is about our egos. For us being able to say, oh, I've done this, that, and the other, I'm doing this, I'm so busy. There's a lot of motivation to say yes and to add to and continue to add, because it's for our egos. It really is a way for us to tell ourselves we are doing the max, which you may be doing the max, but how well are you doing all of these things that you keep adding to yourself? All right, so I got an activity I want you to do. So everybody pay attention for just a minute, okay? I got you, everybody? You looking? You good? Okay. I want you to pat your head, rub your stomach, and click your heels. Pat your head, rub your stomach, click your heels. All right, how many of you are trying to do all three of those things at the same time? I didn't say do it at the same time. Okay, but there you went. You went and tried to do it all at the same time. I did too. Oh, don't be ashamed, Ernie. And you know what? If you could do all three at the same time, good on you. I probably can't pat, rub, and click all at the same time. But again, that just is such a good way of characterizing the fact that we automatically go to add. I didn't say you had to do them all at the same time. Everybody just starts doing it all at the same time. You could have done them all 1, 2, 3. You could have there's so many ways to go, but it's just a good example that our brains are biased towards adding and pushing ourselves to do the max. So here's a visual example. This comes from, the full story is in the book Subtract, which is written by Lee Klotz, the guy we saw, the engineer we saw in the video, who was talking about his son and working on the Legos and how this kind of thought has all come about. But this is San Francisco's waterfront in the 80s. And then again in 2015, this beautiful piece of property, this place, was covered up by a massive freeway, and a very heavily used freeway, until someone came forward and said, I think actually the earthquake that happened in the 80s caused damage to it, and instead of rebuilding it, they took it down. And look at what it has become. And it's one of the most visited places on the West Coast in the US as a part of San Francisco's waterfront. And it would not exist if they hadn't taken the time to really think about taking it down, rerouting traffic, urging people to use public transportation in this particular space. We wouldn't have the beauty that we have there now if someone hadn't subtracted. But one of the reasons we tend to overlook subtraction as a solution for problems is that there's biological, cultural, and economic things encouraging us to do more and encouraging us to add to and not look for less. When you build something, it gets to sit there as firsthand evidence of your fabulous brilliance. People get to drive by it every day. You get to see it. Other people get to see it or touch it when you add more, when you do too. Whereas subtraction is rarely recognized, even when it is a better solution for a problem, because nobody gets to see what isn't there. Nobody gets to see really or enjoy, and our egos don't get the fulfillment of subtraction. This beautiful spot, I'm sure the engineers who originally built that bridge were really given a pat on the back for it and talked about how great it was and could drive by and see their work every single day. But the people who decided to take it down don't get that. The city managers who decided to remove it, most people don't go by and pat them on the back and thank them for that, because it's not something that they can see anymore. So just as we can't fly without respecting and understanding gravity, we can't get to less without respecting the forces that are pulling us towards more. Once you understand the reasons, the motivations on why we lean towards more, we can get really down to why we need to be leaning more towards less. Here's another really great example, okay? So we need to stop thinking about adding or subtracting. Maybe we can start thinking about adding and subtracting. Does anybody know what we're looking at in this photo? You can put it in the chat. Yes, thank you, Rachel. Yes, Catherine. So I've never actually really seen it like this from this particular angle. And it gives you such a great view of what adding and subtracting truly looks like. So as everybody has said, we are looking at the Vietnam Memorial. When trying to solve a problem, our first instinct is usually to add. And since we imagine adding and subtracting are in oppositions, we fail to consider subtraction first. But if we can shift our thinking slightly from add or subtract to add and subtract, possibilities occur. And this is one of the greatest examples of that. Maya Lin, who designed the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in Washington, D.C., did both add and subtract. She cut the monument into the earth, as you see here, and made it much smaller and more understated than the other monuments that are on the mall. It's also what makes it really noticeable, is it's not just some big, huge, erected, tall, gigantic monument. It's cut into the ground. But she also added, the monument includes the names of all of the Americans who died in that conflict, which is not something that is seen on any of the other nearby monuments. So by adding and subtracting, she really created a design masterpiece here. She built it into the ground. Its scale and size is smaller in the sense that it is not competing size-wise with the monuments around it, but she added to it by adding all the names of the people who died in that conflict. All right, so doing less at work, people will say that that equals quiet quitting. Okay, I know you've all heard this term. It's a super popular term right now. But quiet quitting or doing less at work, whatever you want to call it, is not literally about doing less at your job or not doing your job. It's about having and setting boundaries. Something that we are probably not all that great at. So quiet quitting, doing the task involved with your assigned role at work, no more, no less, doing your job without your job taking over your entire life. That is the actual definition of what people are called quiet quitting. And what quiet quitting is people are no longer willing or able to just continue to take on additional tasks, additional roles, additional things that are not a part of their actual job. People are just burned out. And we've seen that with, people leaving their jobs in droves, quitting, looking for something different constantly because they're just so overwhelmed with the amount of work that they're being asked to do that is outside the scope and purview of their actual job, things that are just getting added and added and added and added. So what we need to do here is look at your job description, what you're supposed to be doing versus what you're actually doing. Maybe it's time to have a conversation with your supervisor that says, look, my job description says I do this. What I'm actually doing is this. We either need to fix my job description or we need to work on reassigning some of this back into its appropriate areas. We need to start getting some of this redistributed back. It's okay to have boundaries. And I don't know how many people on here need to hear that today, but it is okay to have boundaries. It's okay to, as we've already talked about, when you leave work, to leave work. It is okay. You are allowed to be present for your family. You are allowed to be present for those that you care about. You are allowed to be there. You are replaceable at work. You are not replaceable at home. And so when you walk out that door, I know all of us feel like, oh, you know, and again, it's a little bit of our ego, right? Like, I'm so important. My job is so important. What I do is so important that it can't wait until 8:30 or 9 tomorrow. But in reality, it can. And when you're asking yourself, I'm going to stay late, I'm going to take this home, I'm going to do the X, Y, or Z, you need to be being honest with yourself about what you're giving up and what you are sacrificing in order to do that. Every Sunday night, I pull my laptop out and I kind of get my head on straight for the week. That is helpful to me. I like doing that. That actually makes me feel better about starting my work week. That kind of stuff is fine. If you go home and you pull your laptop out and it continues to add stress to you and make you feel worse and make you disengaged with your family during that time, don't do that. If you pull your laptop out and it makes you less stressed and it eases some of that frustration and allows you to do something, then do it, okay? But it needs to be your choice. And you need to be acknowledging what you are sacrificing and what you are giving up in other areas of your life in order to do that. So if you haven't been the best at setting boundaries and work has sort of overrun your life, it may be time for you to take a step back and really think about, what do I need to do? Where is my time most valuable and to whom? We all need our jobs. I got that. I totally understand that. I need income. I need to live. My kids need clothes. I need clothes. I want to be in a job where I, make enough money to retire and do things and all of that. Like, I get it. But I want you to ask yourself, every time you start to bring stuff home with you, when you start to let work interrupt the rest of your life, ask yourself what you're giving up for that. All right, simplify, some things to try. And this comes out of a conversation with the CEO of Future Think, Lisa Bodell. So here are some of her suggestions and things to think about. One is subtract before improving. So just like a hospital, you want to assess. So like I mentioned in the beginning, we were doing strategic planning. Instead of just adding more goals and adding more strategic initiatives and adding more things to do, triage everything you're doing first. Here's all the stuff we are already doing. What can we let go of before we start adding to? So we want to subtract. What can we get rid of? What can we let go of? What do we no longer need to do? Y'all, we do so much stuff we don't really have to do. It's just become like part of your life. It's just become part of your work routine, so you do it. But if you were really to step back and assess it, it may not be necessary. You may not need to do it anymore. There may be other things that can do it on your behalf. So triage, assess before you start adding, figure out what you can let go of first. And make subtraction first. So remember, we always talk about people wanting to add. Subtraction should be your first thought before you want to add another activity, add another committee, add another group, add another thing that you want to do. Make sure that you're trying to balance that out by letting something go in return. Persist to noticeably less. Edit yourself. Edit yourself in your words, with your PowerPoint presentations, with your emails, with your voicemails, with notes, whatever it may be. Edit your life in that same way. What can you let go of? And then reuse your subtractions for growth in other areas. Okay? I'm going to say this. Donut holes. Genius reuse of subtraction when you think about it. Donut holes. They are subtracted from the donut, and then they're reused as tiny, delicious donut pieces if you don't want to feel the guilt about eating a whole donut. You can still get to have the donut whole. That is a great reuse of subtraction. So just because you're subtracting something, much like the Jenga puzzle you see on your page, doesn't mean you have to throw it out. Maybe there's a great way to reuse it. In Jenga, you reuse the pieces you subtract to continue to build. maybe there's ways to subtract where other people can benefit from some of the things that you are subtracting from. I tell people, so people like to think that, and this is related to meetings that's over here on the other side, least number of people in a meeting. People think, oh, I have to be in this meeting. It has to be me. Oh, no, it probably doesn't. And if you're being pulled into 15 meetings a day, is there opportunity for somebody else on your team to go to that meeting? Let them grow, let them learn something new, let them come back and share what they've learned and report out to the rest of the group. When you're saying to yourself, remember, it's that ego feed. We all have it. Oh, it has to be me. I have to be the one to go. Can't be anybody else. Yes, there are some instances where that is true. But there are also some instances, if you're real honest with yourself, where that's not true. And there are other people in your space and in your areas who may have the opportunity to attend those meetings on your behalf. And then all of a sudden you're growing them as an employee if they have the opportunity to attend and go in your place. The more meetings, I think it may have been Lisa when she was talking about this, the more meetings that you have to go to does not make you a more important person. If you'll notice, most of the time, CEOs and presidents, they're not in all those meetings. It's other people who are in those meetings and reporting back to them. So don't count your work worth by the number of meetings you get invited to attend, okay? Not true. And if there's opportunities for you to send others and allow them to grow as employees, then maybe you should think about that. As you are assessing all the things that you're participating in your life, are there committees and places where you could say, you know what, I've enjoyed serving on this committee, but I think it's time for me to step back and allow someone else the opportunity to serve here so that they can grow. If you're on committees where you dread going to those meetings, or committees, boards, communities, events, whatever it is, it's time for you to go. It's time for you to roll off and allow somebody else the opportunity to be there. Some other ideas for trying to simplify, work hackathons, just like, they did hackathons right when hacking was a big thing right in the beginning. You can do a work hack as well, where you get your whole team in a room and you start trying to, what exactly do we do every day? Start talking through the things that you do and start saying to each other, why do you do that? Because I guarantee you, not everybody will be able to answer that question. They'll say, well, I don't know. So-and-so, when I took this job, told me it was part of the job, and so I do it. Well, okay, but why? What are you getting out of it? Like, who's benefiting from this action? And a lot of times people will say, I don't know. I don't know why I do it. I just do it because that person who was here before me did it. It is just one of those things. So a work hackathon, get in the room, talk about what you're doing every single day and start trying to figure out what you can cut out. Cut the crap committees. You could have a committee where you sit around and talk with people and figure out where the crap is and how to cut it. Start getting better about, efficiencies and effectiveness and how there are too many steps in a lot of our processes. And look, being in higher ed, we know that better than anybody else. There is so much red tape. There are too many steps. What are some steps can we eliminate? How can we make it less steps? Bring it from 5 to 3. How can we make less people have to be involved in this and minimizing that? Create a code of conduct where you can do this in board meetings. If you're an organization that has a board, if you don't already have consent agendas for the board meetings that you attend, this is really an excellent way to make that board meeting more efficient. Someone said to us here, meetings are for making decisions and solving problems. And if you are not doing that in a meeting, then the meeting is not necessary. Meetings are for making decisions and solving problems. And if you're in a meeting and you're not making a decisions as a group or solving problems as a group, that meeting is not necessary. And that means that it's just an update meeting. People are just sharing what they're doing. You can do that in an email. You can do that in a video. If you want to record a video to send out to everybody that lets them know what you're working on, But consent agendas for board meetings are exactly that. You let everybody give all their updates in the consent agenda. It's sent out 2 or 3 days before the actual board meeting. Everybody can read through all the information prior to being there. And yes, I know some people won't, but we're going to give them the benefit of the doubt. They can read it in the meeting when they get there. They'll have it in front of them. That really saves time so that when you're in the meeting, you are simply focused on solving problems, making decisions. So everything from that consent agenda, everybody has agreed to have read it prior to the meeting, get in the meeting. That's where you ask your questions. That's where you make proposals and people vote and make decisions. That's where you bring up problems or issues and you work on solving those instead of just providing updates or simply only being informative. So consent agendas are great. They really work in any environment, not just for boards and committees, but they're very often used that way first, but you can really use consent agendas for everything. Track your time. I mean, in our coaching and in the executive coaching we do, one of the very first things that we ask coachees about is, what are you spending your time on? What are you doing every day? Have you really sat down and thought about what are you spending your time on in the workplace? And if you do, I guarantee you are going to look at some of the things that you write down once you track your time and go, why am I spending 30 minutes on that every single day? Why am I doing that? There will be things that you'll be able to let go of. Kill a stupid rule. And this kind of goes back to cutting through red tape and minimizing things and cutting steps out when there are 20 steps, when there really only needs to be 5, really doing kind of that 6 Sigma assessment of what's going on in the organization and trying to minimize and simplify. If you've got dumb rules, especially rules that nobody follows, and then when I say rules, this also goes for policies, procedures, anything of that nature that is out there that isn't adhered to, is old, is outdated. It may be time to let some of those things go. Bluff, which is one of my favorite phrases, bottom line, upfront. So if you want to send an email, you should start with the bluff. Get to what you want, bottom line, upfront. Say that first. Then you can say everything else you need to say afterwards. Anything else you want to share, you can share it after that. But putting the bottom line up front really helps people focus their attention and narrow the discussion. That works in meetings too. If you're going to meet, what are we doing here? So bottom line up front, what is the purpose of this meeting? Share that with everyone and let's get focused on trying to either solve that problem, answer that question, and do whatever, make that decision. And then anything else that can come after it can come after it. The least number of people in a meeting, we've already addressed that one, but least number of people in a meeting is a good thing. Not being invited to a meeting does not mean you're not important. It means you're so important, your time is so valuable that you don't need to spend it in this meeting, that you can serve your time better elsewhere. The NNTR, this is great for emails. NNTR just means no need to reply. When you're just letting people know about something and you are trying to inform them about something and you seriously don't need a reply because Lord knows, thanks, thumbs up, got it, all that. That's just one more email in my inbox I have to delete or open or move. And please, Lord, don't reply all. But if you start your email where you're just trying to inform a group of people about something and you don't need them to apply, need them to reply, then just say no need to reply. It is so freeing when you see that in an email. It's like, nice, I don't have to say thanks, because 9 times out of 10 we're all saying thanks because we feel like the other person on the other end is going to be mad or think we're rude if we don't say thanks or if we don't say got it. No need to reply is excellent, and it frees the reader on the other end of feeling that obligatory obligation to say thanks or whatever they say. Turn agendas into questions. That really helps keep the meeting focused as well. Instead of just listing items, write those items as questions. What are we trying to solve or answer? And that will help to keep meetings focused and keep things on the agenda. Also, just stop it. Stop it. Stop doing those things. Whatever the things are that are time sucks, time wasters, that aren't benefiting you, the job, your career, your kids, your family, your sanity. Stop. Start figuring out what you need to let go of and start figuring out how to say no. When you say no, you are giving other people the opportunity to say yes. And that, whether that's serving on committees or boards or figuring out how maybe you're saying yes to your family because you're saying no to something else. Maybe you're saying yes to actually going to the gym because you're saying no to something else. Saying no is important. Saying no isn't mean. Saying no is opening up opportunities for others to step into those particular slots and those particular roles and those particular spaces. We always worry that people are going to be mad at us for saying no. 9 times out of 10, they don't mind. They understand. It's our own egos that make us think people are going to be upset with us. Because in the body, really, let's be real, people don't think about you that much. And that's just the truth. People just don't think about other people as much as we think they do. We think about ourselves a whole lot. We spend a whole lot of time thinking about ourselves. We design, organize, put our days together thinking about ourselves. But we really don't think about other people that much. And when you say no to something, most likely that person is like, got it, thanks. And they move on to asking someone else. And really, sometimes if it would make you feel better when you say no, you can always suggest someone else that may be great for that particular role, committee, meeting. If it would make you feel better to make the suggestion, make it. But in reality, people really just aren't thinking about you. They're thinking about themselves and they're thinking about their own obligations. And so don't feel bad about saying no. They really aren't thinking about it. They're moving on immediately after you say it. All right, so last thing that I'd like for us to do in these last 15 or so minutes that we have is I want you to think about some of these questions. What are you and your team's biggest time sucks? Okay. Doesn't mean it's unproductive. I just want you to think about where are you spending your time. You may be spending a lot of time on something you have to do. But once you identify how much time you're spending on something, then get with your team and figure out how can we still do a good job, still do what we need to do, but spend less time on it. I guarantee you there are steps that can be removed. There are things that can simplify, and your team's probably got great ideas and suggestions on how to do it. Ask yourself why you're doing it and why do you wish you could spend, what would you rather spend your time doing if you could get rid of some of this time suck? What could you accomplish? What could you do? Where could you spend your time? If you were able to decrease some of these time sucking activities at work or at home, this applies both places, okay? What questions would you love to ask your team, but maybe you've been a little too scared or too embarrassed to ask? So if you have a team that works for you, or if you are part of a team, not necessarily the boss, but you're part of a team, what are some questions you would love to ask, but you've been too scared or embarrassed to ask it? A lot of times this is like on how to do something or more efficient or effective ways of doing things. A lot of times we don't want to ask because we don't want anybody to know we really don't know how to do it. We've just been doing it this particular way because so-and-so taught it to us. We know in the back of our mind, there's got to be an easier, more effective, more efficient way. We're just too afraid to ask or too embarrassed to ask. Man, ask. Ask and let's get more efficient and let's get more effective. If you had to eliminate 25% of what you do every day, what would you eliminate and why? That's a great question to pose to your team. That is a great question to figure out if they had the choice, or not even the choice, if they had to eliminate 25% of what they were working on every day, what would they eliminate and why? That will give you some real insight, probably into some things that the team can probably stop doing. I would imagine you'd hear some things and you'd say, "What? Wait, why are you even doing that? That's not," I'm like, "You don't have to do that." And they'd say, I don't have to do this. And you're like, no, stop doing that. It happens every single time. You're going to hear things that your team members are doing that you're going to be like, oh no, let's not do that. Let's let go of that. And then ask yourself, just what if I didn't? What if you didn't? What if you didn't do whatever the thing was? What's going to happen? And maybe the answer is an improvement in something else. And that doesn't necessarily mean just work. Maybe it's an improvement in your mental health or emotional health, or improvement with your spouse or your kids, or doing activities you enjoy. But just what if you didn't do it? Ask yourself those questions. I want you to think about those things. Marinate on less and how we can get to that. All right. So
And Shayna, before we move on to the last slide, I definitely want to add this question in that came in from Ernie. So another killer question is that he's asked in the past to his boss is, what's the worst thing that can happen if we don't do this? So it's reiterating kind of what Shayna mentioned. What if we didn't? So I just wanted to throw that out there.
Absolutely. And thanks, Ernie. We appreciate your insights, my friend. And so, like, you are allowed to ask those questions. You are allowed to ask. You are allowed to say to your boss, what if we didn't do this? What is the worst thing that could happen? Because maybe the answer is there's not a worst thing that could happen. Maybe something good could come out of it if you chose not to do something and focus more time, effort, and energy on something else. Okay. I'm going to move over to this last slide, which is an advertisement for our next upcoming session. And then, of course, we would love for you to evaluate this particular session if it was helpful to you at all. And then I want us to have our last 5-ish minutes here to open the floor up to questions, comments, anything anybody would like to share about doing less. And if you are interested in reading Leedy Klotz's book called Subtract, it is available everywhere, but it's The Untapped Science of Less. It's a little academic, so maybe not the most interesting read possible, but really good information on the idea that we are biased towards adding, and that we really need to start considering subtraction and doing less first before we put anything else on our plates, or on our goals, or on our strategic plannings and initiatives and things of that nature. We need to subtract. We need to do less first. Questions? Yes, the name, thank you, Luana. The name of the book is Subtract. And I'm trying to make sure that my camera doesn't make this fuzzy. And the author is Leedy Klotz. I don't know if you can see that.
It's still blurry, but Shayna, I will make sure I include a link to that book in our follow-up email. And if you would like a copy of today's presentation, please go ahead and drop your email address in the chat. I was working in the background to obtain some of your emails while we were on this, but if you could drop your emails if you want this information. Shayna, I do have a question from Perry. So let me make this enlarge. Which do you consider doing less? 5 days a week at 8 hours, or 4 days a week at 10-hour days?
Whatever is most productive is what would be less. So if you are more productive in 10-hour days, you actually are accomplishing more and you're feeling good about it, then I would say that would be the less response, right? If you don't think you'd be productive at 10-hour days, for whatever variety of reasons, kids' activities after school, needing to help with homework, you're the primary caregiver of others, then 5 days a week may be what works best for you because of external obligations. But whatever feels most productive for you, I think, my personal opinion, that would be the best less response.
Thank you for that, Shayna. And we have another book recommendation from Christine, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. So
Yes.
check out the chat if you want to get the name of that book.
Excellent. Thank you, Christine. Great recommendation.
Well, thank you again for attending today's session. I will be sending a follow-up email with a link to this recording, as well as information about our next disruptive webinar that will be next month. If you have any suggestions on topics or any disruptors that you would like for us to talk about in future webinars, please send that information to leadership@columbusstate.edu, and follow us on all social media platforms using @CSU Leadership. So again, thank you for your time, and we hope to see you next month.
Thanks, guys. Do less.
Thank you, James. Bye-bye. Bye, everyone.